about the afterlife. It's one of those topics that seems to tug at our hearts and our minds. We wonder, will we recognize those we loved? Will the essence of who we are persist beyond this earthly life? Let's dive into the biblical evidence to explore this poignant question, adding a bit of Lewis-esque charm along the way. More than just a body. First, let's debunk a rather dreary notion proposed by philosophical and religious materialists. They argue that humans are merely mortal beings, nothing more than flesh and bones. However, Scripture paints a different picture. Remember Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. We are created in the image of God. Now, if God is spirit, as stated in John chapter 4, verse 24, and not a physical being, as mentioned in Luke chapter 24, verse 39, and Matthew chapter 16, verse 17, it stands to reason there's something within us that transcends our flesh. Consider Daniel's declaration. My spirit was grieved in the midst of my body, from Daniel chapter 7, verse 15. Grief, an emotion of the mind, not the flesh. Similarly, Paul tells us that the spirit within man possesses knowledge, as noted in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. It's clear that within each of us there exists a conscious entity known as the spirit. The spirit beyond death. Now here's a critical point. There is no evidence to suggest the spirit changes with death. When we die, our spirit simply transitions from one existence to another. And here's the comforting part. This spirit retains consciousness and the capability for recognition. In fact, freed from the flesh, our awareness might even be heightened. Evidence of recognition after death. Let's explore the biblical evidence supporting the notion of recognition after death. Abraham gathered to his people. When Abraham died, it said he was gathered to his people. Genesis 25, verse 8. This phrase doesn't refer to his burial, for he was buried in Canaan, far from his ancestors' graves. Instead, it signifies a reunion with loved ones in Sheol, the abode of departed spirits. Jacob's mourning of Joseph. When Jacob mourned Joseph, believing him to be dead, he declared he would go down to Sheol to my son mourning. Genesis 37, verse 35. Jacob wasn't planning on joining Joseph in a grave, but anticipated reuniting with him in Sheol, implying recognition after death. David and his infant son. Similarly, when David lost his infant son, he said, I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. 2 Samuel 12, verse 23. This statement reflects David's belief in a continued existence and recognition in the afterlife. The Transfiguration. Consider the Transfiguration, as described in Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 to 4. Here, Jesus is joined by Moses and Elijah. Despite these Old Testament saints having been dead for centuries, the disciples recognized them. If they could recognize those they hadn't met on earth, surely we can recognize those we've known. The Great Judgment Scene. In Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 to 46, Jesus describes the Judgment Day. He speaks of a dialogue between the righteous and himself, indicating a memory of earthly events and relationships. The Unrighteous Steward. In the parable of the unrighteous steward, found in Luke chapter 16, verses 1 through 9, Jesus emphasizes using earthly resources to secure eternal friendships. This suggests a recognition of these friends in the afterlife. The Rich Man and Lazarus. The rich man, upon seeing Lazarus in Abraham's bosom, as described in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31, recognizes him and recalls his own life and family. This underscores personal recognition after death. Addressing common objections. Some argue that without physical bodies, we won't recognize one another. However, we don't need physical traits to identify people. Consider how we recognize loved ones through their voices, mannerisms, and even their spirit. Moreover, the recognition of God, who is spirit, assures us that physical appearance isn't necessary for recognition. Another concern is how we can be happy in heaven if loved ones are absent. Remember, God is described as happy in 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 11, despite knowing the fate of the lost. Our understanding of sin and justice will be perfected in the afterlife, allowing us to find peace even in such knowledge. The joyful reunions await. The biblical evidence and logic affirm that we will indeed recognize our loved ones in heaven. As we journey through this life, let us hold on to this hope, pressing toward the goal with the anticipation of joyful reunions beyond the veil of death. May we all strive to live faithfully, looking forward to the glories that await us, and the eternal fellowship with those we hold dear.